Welcome to our town hall and welcome to our closing session. I'm delighted to bring up my co-host for this session, Ollie Barrett. Ollie.
Thank you very much, Edie.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm very well. It's very nice to see everybody and to be in the room, but also hearing from colleagues who have been following today vicariously through Twitter as well. We really have sort of sent messages far and wide. Lots of great resonance around the world.
Exactly.
And everyone who's been up on this stage. This is the one I've been looking forward to.
Absolutely. And this is such a big topic. We are on the road to COP27. Very short road indeed, isn't it? Crucial meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh. So we've got about 45 minutes to crack it, Ollie. What's coming up?
Well, just to give you a sense of what to expect, it won't just be the action on the stage. We will be taking questions from some of our guests and reflections from you. And we're going to keep it quite snappy. So we're not going to be afraid to take different perspectives from around the room and, of course, from our honoured guests as well. Let me tell you who we're going to meet. And
why not?
Welcome them one by one. In fact, why don't we bring them onto the stage one by one? Lord Grimstone, please join me up on stage. Senator Renzi, I will introduce them one by one formally. Good to see you, sir. Please come and have a seat. And Senator Renzi, very nice to see you.
How are you?
And we're joined by Dr. Yasmin Fuad as well, who joins us down the line. So we say, why don't I say a formal welcome to our three guests. You see, first and foremost on our screens, Dr. Yasmin Fuad, Minister of Environment of the Arabic Republic of Egypt. Of course, welcoming all guests from around the world for COP27. Known to many of you surely, Senator Matteo Renzi, Senator for Florence, of course, the former Prime Minister of Italy. Senator Renzi, thank you for being with us today and for all of your work. By no means least, Lord Grimstone, Lord Jerry Grimstone, is the Minister for Investment at the Department for International Trade and Development for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy here for the Government of the United Kingdom. Why don't we give them all an FII welcome. Welcome.
Well, let's kick off. Let's kick off looking over to Egypt, looking ahead into the future, a few months down the road. Your Excellency, Dr. Yasmin Fuad, why don't you set the stage for us? You're hosting COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. Tell us, what is at stake?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you virtually. I hope you can hear me well.
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Great. Thank you very much for the invitation and for that very interesting session. COP27 is coming in a very critical year, as you all know, in 2022. So we finished with the pandemic and now with the geopolitics. However, climate has been more and more evident in each and every single place around the world without differentiation between any of the countries. And from that perspective, Egypt aims to build upon the successes that came out from Glasgow and move ahead with all negotiation tracks in a balanced manner, in a way that would reach consensus to push forward the climate action agenda. And when I'm talking about action here, especially that we have finished the Paris rule book, we're talking about COP27 is COP for implementation. And when we're talking about implementation here, we would like to set three important messages. The first one, an implementation means an inclusive process where everyone should be around the table, not only the governments, the private sector, the civil society, the citizens, the youth, the women, and even the local communities that are hit hard by climate change impact. Secondly, when we're talking about implementations, we're talking about moving from the pledges to actual commitments that is put around the table to fulfill the demand of facing climate change. Thirdly, urgency is there. So if we want to implement, then that should be doable and not in a phase of a trial and error. And from that, we expect that the COP would show the success stories and the interventions made by various stakeholders. For example, in the last session, I've attended the last 5 minutes, there was that messages on the investment and the private sector and the vast opportunities for renewable energy and what Egypt has done. These kind of stories we need to bring to COP27. But much more important stories that would need to be there, which are the stories of the vulnerable communities and how best they were able to adapt in order to be further replicated and upscaled. Stories from how adaptation could include the private sector in its part, and how can the private sector be part of that both mitigation and adaptation. Egypt yesterday, for example, has launched its climate change national strategy up till 2050.
Right.
When you read that strategy, it's not about mitigation and adaptation. It's about a whole comprehensive integrated system that include governance, roles and responsibility, include infrastructure for the financial system, and include the science and technology at the heart of that.
Yep.
And how that is the other coin of the sustainable development, which is the core of our discussion in the session today, when we're talking about the emerging markets and
Yes.
the ESG and how best they can perform. So we are expecting a COP that would really move the climate action and the climate agenda in a just transition mode in mitigation and adaptation, and equally everyone around the table would be willing of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So building a bigger table, getting more voices around it, turning pleasures into action, and then the need for speed and also storytelling so that we don't lose faith. Senator Renzi, a short road to COP27, what must it look like?
It's interesting because Dr. Jasmine, she's the future. Yeah. Lord Jerry is the present, I'm the past. I attend to our conference was Paris in 2015. I think that, I believe, as the Minister of Egypt explains very well, this year is a particular year. Because there is not simply a problem about sustainability. I believe that is a time of radical change in the planet. And the Ukraine crisis is not only a great problem for our friends in Ukraine and the problem for Donbass, Odessa, Mariupol, etc. But it's the end of Yalta peace, Yalta Agreement. It's the start a new beginning of a new era. This is my opinion. And that particularly true is for the appointment in Sharm el-Sheikh, FII Institute, to try to discuss about that in a key moment. Because not only sustainability, but also food, as we understand in this very interesting day, food, demography, migration, energy, everything changes. So I believe the real challenge of Sharm el-Sheikh summit will be to combine together and try to bring together the questions of traditional COP with the new geopolitics challenge. And not easy because a lot of politicians, particularly in our countries, thinking only about the day by day, only about Instagram post, only about the last tweet. I believe COP27 will be a great success if our friends in Egypt and all the leaders who attempted to this event will be able to combine together the present with the vision of the future. Not easy for the politics of today, unfortunately.
Right. So on that, you modestly put yourself as one of those figures in the past. Of course you play a role today. What's your number one message to the players on the pitch who are going to be signing these agreements in COP27? Be as blunt as you like.
The question is, okay, sign some agreement about goals. You remember, in Paris we signed a particular agreement, then in Glasgow, etc. But the real question today, I believe, is not the number of goals in the agreement, but will be the capacity to have a comprehensive look about the future. My real preoccupation today is we discuss about a single dossier, single topic, without a comprehensive vision. Just one example, migration. And migration is also a problem for sustainability, of course. Thinking about what happened. I was prime minister when an unbelievable number of migrants arrived from Africa to Europe, particularly in Italy and Greece, but also in Germany. You remember the question of Syria, etc. Today, we have a problem of migration potentially, not only for the question of traditional problems, but also for the lack of food after Ukraine crisis.
Yes.
So we have a huge problem, different respect to the past. So I don't know what my message for the next generation of leader. Okay, try to arrive to good agreement, to good goals, but the real question is to have a comprehensive vision.
Yes.
How is deep the change in the world?
Embracing the connectivity, the complexity of these problems.
And that's what we've heard a lot about today, is that these are not simple issues. They cannot be described in a 240-character tweet, regardless of what Elon Musk might think. Lord Grimstone, we've heard what's at stake. We've also heard what that road needs to look like and his message to those folks who are going to be negotiating. Tell us, what's the prize?
Well, look, the prize is actually getting to where we all know we have to get to.
Which is?
Net zero. But I love the passion. I love the goals. I love the rhetoric. But I've moved beyond that because I just now take for granted that anybody sensible, anybody rational knows that we have to do it. So I am much more interested and much more concerned with the practicalities. How are we going to do it? Where are we going to raise the finance from to do it? How are we going to support those places which don't have the finance to do it? And this requires, completely new thinking. And we're having to do this at a time when the world is more troubled than almost any time in my lifetime. And I say that as probably one of the oldest people in the room here today.
Give us some guidelines on how you think that should happen then. What should be done?
It is the creation of investable propositions that people can invest in to drive us towards net zero. When I came into my role as the UK's Minister for Investment, everywhere I looked, there were investment aspirations. Aspirations are wonderful. We must do hydrogen. We must do carbon capture. We must think again about nuclear. The problem with aspirations, you can go to bed at night feeling warm about them, but you can't invest in an aspiration. You have to turn these aspirations into investable projects.
And is emerging markets and investing in emerging markets, that high enough up the agenda? That's our topic today.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, because we are literally all in this together.
So why don't we go a bit closer to home, Lord Grimstone, in the UK? Give us a sense of how the UK is preparing for what is a monumental meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Well, first of all, we are dealing with the practicalities. But most importantly, we want to maintain the momentum of COP26. Now, you would think that was entirely straightforward. Who would not want to maintain that momentum? But we're doing this at a time, as my great friend just said, at a time of unprecedented, change in the world. I mean, the impacts of Ukraine, the impacts of inflation, living with the aftermath of the pandemic. So the challenge will be, how do we keep on moving this forward in a world which is amazingly different to what it was only a year ago, only 2 years ago.
And what are the roadblocks then from a practical, let's have an example of the roadblocks to that progress, because the vision is clear, the sense of ambition is clear. What's in the way?
Too much talk, not enough action.
All right. All right, well, let's take that. Let's see what action we need from governments. Senator Renzi, you've signed the Paris Accord. You've led your country. What does the policy agenda have to look like right now?
I'm not a politician. I'm not the leader of my country. But I believe that maybe it's a surprise for a lot of you, but in terms of a political agenda, the priority nobody discuss in that moment, particularly in Europe, is the crisis of demography. That is worse than every emergency. I know, probably you think this guy is crazy. It's true, but not for that. Look about the history, the civilization, and for the crisis in demography, not for other things. Europe today discuss a lot about climate change. Good, very important. Also, if we change some projects, because we started from 6 months ago, the idea of Europe was we have to get off Poland for the problem on LGBT community, and we have to follow Greta. Now we follow Poland for the crisis in Ukraine, and we search nuclear energy. That just in 6 months, just to understand what happened in Europe.
Right.
But we can discuss about that, about migration, about everything. Look the numbers. China and India together will be 3 billion of people in the next months, more or less. Europe, unfortunately, without the UK, will be in the next year more or less 450 million. Nigeria, in the next 20 years, will be bigger than Europe. Sorry, not Africa, bigger than Europe. Nigeria, one of 54 countries around the world. So what is the problem? The problem is, in the political agenda, we have to start from that priority. First, Europe will have a role, yes or not?
Yes or not?
For me, of course, in my dream, see. Yes, see. In my nightmare, I'm really worried because we risk to become spectators of the match between USA and China. G20 was one of the most important initiatives in 2008, 2009, I don't remember, maybe the last Bush government, the Bush administration. But today, the risk is transforming G20 in G2, USA and China. So we have a lot of considerations about the question, but political agenda, we can discuss about the renewables. Yes, we have a problem. For example, in Italy, we have the first problem for the lack of investment in renewables is bureaucracy. Strange for Italy, very strange. But I think we have a lot of single topics in the single point. We can discuss about oil and gas, solar, what is the translation, the possible consequence about a lot of things. But if you ask me, what is the priority in political agenda? I think there is a stone nobody look. This is the lack of the capacity to understand how is important the problem of demography in Europe.
Okay.
Yeah, got it. So a huge challenge there. Dr. Fouad, our understanding about any conference of the parties is that the vast majority of the work, the biggest part of the iceberg, happens in the run-up to the conference itself. What can you give us as an indication of how things are progressing?
Thank you very much. Last week, we have, with the UK presidency, Alok Sharma and Minister Sameh Shukri, had convened a meeting in Copenhagen, thanks to Denmark, gathering the ministers of environment in order to start discussing once again the climate agenda before even the SVs, which is the official track for the UNFCCC. And that was a very important meeting to keep the momentum going, as His Excellency Minister of Investment was mentioning, and the Prime Minister, in order to see how can we build upon COP26, what is expected from COP27. Two important parts, by the way, that came out from COP26 that the world is looking at. One is the preparation for the global goal on adaptation, and how that can be rapidly done, and what does that mean? And the second one is starting the discussion on the new collective goal on finance, because those two are really very important to keep discussing. One thing also that is happening right now is the preparation in our country, in Egypt, to Sharm el-Sheikh for receiving all the delegations that will be there. So we're turning Sharm el-Sheikh to a complete green city. We are changing the whole transport system for an e-mobility. We're changing the hotels to have a green star. We're changing the solar PVs at the hotels and giving them a partnership with the private sector and from the banking sector in order to be able to bear that kind of cost in a world after the pandemic. And we're changing the whole waste management system. Why I'm giving that example? Because that example is the thing that I was talking about. How can we articulate comprehensive and integrity and integration in that COP? That would only be by showing and not telling, because people are really fed up of telling and talking. So
that's right, isn't it?
And having that to be upscaled, that's important.
Yeah, so that must be right. And we'll talk about the goals that we're looking to score in Sharm el-Sheikh. But Dr. Fouad, you make the point that if we don't tell the stories of success, if we don't turn words into deeds, everyone will lose faith. How confident are you that the mechanisms are in place to hold countries to account for the pledges that they have made?
We need to keep pushing on the pledges that were made and how that could be realized through the leaders, through the different high-level officials and ministers, and through also one important part is showing the win approach. If we, for an example, talking about the private sector inclusion as part of the international climate finance system, we need to think of what are the innovative tools that we can bring to the financial mechanism in order to be able to encourage and to push in implementation of that.
Right, good. And we'll talk specifically about that private sector intervention very shortly. But why don't we get a bit more specific, Edie?
Yeah, well, let's build on some of what we've heard in the past. We've talked about some of the previous conferences of the parties. I've been to several of them. It can be confusing. You have different countries making different announcements. You have companies making announcements. You have non-state actors making announcements. It can be tough to figure out actually what really happened and what was really important that happened until a few weeks after the conference. It kind of muddies the waters in a way. I wonder if you could just help us focus on success, what success really looks like. You've started to go into that a bit, Dr. Fouad. What do you think, Senator Renzi, what do we have to see to declare victory at COP?
The real victory will be possible only if there is a great knowledge from the leaders, governors, government leaders. I'm very frank with you. We can discuss a lot about the modality, the technicalities, how is the good session, and of course, Dr. Fouad, she's a very good minister, so she will prepare everything very well. But the real question will be if there is a real engagement from leaders or not. I was witness in Paris. I remember how it was important for President of the United States, Barack Obama, last COP for him, this event. And I was witness of the long discussion and dialogue between Obama and President Xi Jinping and Obama and Prime Minister Modi. Because in 2015, the real question about climate change were about particularly China and India, of course. So it depends from the ability and the desire of the leaders to put really that question as crucial. Will be possible? I don't know.
So just briefly, go back with us now to the younger Matteo Renzi and give yourself a brutal piece of coaching on what you could have done differently.
I believe, for the old chair, try to coaching
your former self as you're signing the Paris Agreement, you know, because you're talking about a world of opportunity there.
I believe the real question is try to think, but that this is true particularly for the Western communities, for the Western government. Try to don't think about day by day, but try to have a long vision of project. That is true, for example, in Saudi, the idea of Vision 2030 is important. Of course, this is a different model. Xi Jinping tried to, with One Belt, One Road. Our problem, for a lot of reasons, the first, we believe in a different system and so in democracy, we don't think about the next generation, but we think about the next elections.
So you sound like
usually we think about the next post on Twitter.
okay.
That is the real problem. But if we think about the next election, it's not so bad.
Senator Renzi, it sounds like you're admitting to thinking too short term. I'd just like to understand why.
Okay, of course. I was prime minister for 3 years. In Italy is a geological era. Because usually we change a prime minister every year. So I joke a lot with a lot of people because all my colleagues stay for, Angela Merkel, she stayed for 16 years. Right. So she changed 8 prime ministers. Berlusconi a lot of time, but that is a different thing. So I believe the question about time is true, particularly for sustainability and for COP27. So I have a great admiration for the good possibilities in Sharm el-Sheikh. I think Egypt is... we work a lot with President al-Sisi when we discover an oil and gas in Egypt 8 years ago with the ENI, the important company in Italy, but the real question is not the single dossier, but a vision for the future. Myself, I think, not think about day by day, but think about next generation.
So thinking long term. Lord Grimstone, what for you do we have to see to declare victory in Sharm el-Sheikh?
Well, I think we have to have the pledges renewed. But then, of course, we know where the starting point is. That's now. We know where the finishing point is. That's when the pledges have to be delivered by. But the path in between them, to my mind, is still very vague, still very indistinct. And I'm sorry to be repetitive, but it comes back again to the practicalities. The pledges, in a sense, are easy. Particularly now the intellectual argument has been won of what are the dreadful global effects of climate change. That part, I believe, is easy. Yep. It is this path that you have to go down. And look, we're going to have to find something as large as the industrial revolution that we had in this country 200 years ago. Now, interestingly, that industrial revolution was founded entirely on coal. 200 years on, the next industrial revolution, the green industrial revolution, will be founded on the removal of coal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's an amazing change.
And one thing we want from you and all of our guests is your message to the guests in this room at this summit. We're going to come to that, but why don't we take a question from our audience here? Hopefully we can get a microphone to Nisreen El-Saim, a youth climate activist and climate negotiator, UN's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change, joining us from Sudan. Firstly, welcome, Nisreen, and tell us your question.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to congratulate Minister Yasmin for launching their climate strategy for Egypt 2050. It was, I think, yesterday. It's a very big step, only if we actually manage to have the planet by 2050.
Right.
Secondly, I really liked what Senator Matthew said, everything. I am sure it's easier to say it when you are not the prime minister anymore. Sorry.
And your question, Yasmin?
My question is, earlier at the opening session, we heard that it's
You bring my name, eh? Yes, Senator Material.
My memory is
very
bad,
good
I'm sorry.
propaganda for election. Yes.
Let me hear the other name also. Sorry, I had to memorize it. Well, we earlier heard from the CEO of FII that it's very important to bring a dialogue. But if the dialogue is not really transparent, if we did not build on it, it's just talking.
Blah, blah, blah.
No, we don't use it anymore. It's already consumed. So my question right now, I've attended 7 COPs until now. I know I look young, but it's not the truth. And I think COP22 in Marrakesh, the slogan was COP of action. So we still have the same slogan every year at every COP. The question is, as a young person representing a lot of young population who are not in this room, and this is also a big question mark, how can we rebuild our trust in the international institutions like UN, like the World Bank, like the biggest institutions that actually we think it's running the world, and it's not running the right way. We are going anti-clockwise.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you.
question. And in the
Excellent.
interest of time, forgive me, panelists, I'm going to ask you to be brief on this because we want more questions in. Lord Grimston.
Well, I think we only can build trust by delivering what people want, and they have to see things happening as a result of that. But look at the extent to which private industry is now taking this into its own hands. Many of the largest global car manufacturers, auto manufacturers, will not be manufacturing internal combustion engine cars beyond 2030. That's only 8 years away.
Yeah.
So that's something which is already happening there.
What's an example of something that Britain could do to rebuild trust in its own institutions?
Oh, I think living up to what we say. I really do. It is delivering.
Give us an example of a gap.
Well, I'm not sure I want to say we have any gaps. Look, there's always going to be a gap between the rhetoric, the expectations, and the practicalities.
So what are you saying in the locker room then? What are you saying? Come on, we have to knuckle down on this. We've said it out loud.
Yes.
Tell us where you're focusing.
Well, let me give you an example. We now have, off the east coast of England, one of the largest wind farms in the world. And you can go there and you can see it.
So where's the gap?
We need more of them.
Okay.
Okay, keep going.
I believe, don't believe only in the international institutions, but not because today we have a problem in the international institution everywhere. Just to make an example, where is United Nations in Ukraine crisis? Do you see the General Secretary? He arrived after 60 days and just to pay a brief tour in trip in Moscow and Kiev. But just to give a message of positivity here, in this stage, also in the connection, you have two men. Larry Fink was the first, is not an international institution, is a financial important investor and manager entrepreneur. He decided to give a message 2 years ago about finance, green finance, important. The other, the chairman also of FII, but the governor of PIF and the chairman of Saudi Aramco, he speak about the project in the green energy, and is the boss of Saudi Aramco. 2 days ago, became the most important company for he surpassed Apple. That is important. So what means that you have some signal of positivity from the world. Don't expect only from institution. Try to be the change in the institution, because you have to try, but at the same time, don't expect only solutions from institution, and please bring the good signals to arrive, for example, from green finance or the most important companies around the world.
Yeah, now I'm conscious, Dr. Fuad will have views on this and all other questions, but time marches, so should we take another question?
Let's take another question. So let's go now to Massimo Mazzacocco, Generation 17 young leader, here from Argentina. What's your question for our guests?
Hi. You listen? Yeah?
Oh yeah.
Thank you. For me, it's a little bit difficult to ask a political correct question, because I come from the global south. We walk the territory every day, and there's a big gap between what is going on in the north and what is going on in the south, generally speaking, no? And in an earlier panel, they ask us, what should we say to the people sitting down in this room as youth? The first thing youth says right now is financial support, because ideas, we have plenty of ideas.
Okay.
We just need to change the economy to an economy that in the center is the health of the ecosystems and the well-being of the human beings, not the result. So the question is, how do we change to an economy where the ecosystem value of a forest is in the cost?
Yes.
Because, for example, I have a friend in a community that all the community lost their house because a global north company came, the forest disappeared, no one paid that cost, and now 50,000 people lost their houses.
Right.
Yes.
How do we do that? And
very clear.
just another thing. I'm not saying this in angry. We are like global citizens, the new generations. We try to work all together. Just trying to understand how to take action. As Nisreen said, we are doing this since 10 years ago and always is take action. And what do you think youth should do to get involved in a way that would listen?
Okay.
If we are very radical,
clear.
don't listen. If we are not very radical, so what is the best way to get involved as youth and move forward to the next
Very
level?
clear. Okay, actually, let's go
Thank
to
you.
Dr. Fouad now. Thank you very much, Maximo. Very clear. One question, Dr. Fouad, there coming through about finance, about changing the economy. Now, I know that this is a subject very close to your heart. You've done a lot of work on this. How do we make sure, just as the title of this entire summit is, how do we make sure the money is going to the right places? Tell us how that particular tract might be developing, first of all.
Thank you very much. I believe that in order for the money to go into the right place, the right enabling environment should be there. For an example, when we're talking about the national level at any country, there should be a robust system for enabling environment that would ensure that the finance that is there in the first place is spent on climate change. For an example, Egypt had taken a very bold step 3 years ago in greening our national budget, aiming to reach 100% of all our government projects to be green projects by 2030. And that was in the middle of the pandemic. Secondly, we need to have a consensus reached by all parties that are there, from the developed and the developing countries, on the streamlining the process of achieving that kind of finance and going to the right place. Because the idea of the finance is not only the quantity of the finance, but also the access to the finance and the ability of the countries to access those finance. Thirdly, which I think is extremely important, those finance will not be sustainable and on a longer term unless the technologies are available for the countries and the local communities at a cost that is affordable and could be replicated and upscaled at each of those levels. Thank you.
Okay. And what about that second question? Senator Renzi, why don't we come to you for that? How can youth be not only heard, but how can they be listened to? What should they be doing differently? What do you think?
First of all, for Massimo, we haven't answered for your question because you and your generation are the answer. Please, thinking about Argentina. Argentina is one of the most beautiful and rich countries around the world. 1 century ago, a lot of Italians left Italy to go to Argentina, and everyone is Italian in Argentina. So it's yes. Last time election, 3 candidates, 3 Italians. Very good. My comment: we will win, of course, but 3 on 3. The real question is. Argentina lost a lot of opportunities in that period. Why? There is a gag, a very important Argentinian, I cannot say the name, told me, God created the world and a beautiful Argentina. They then decided to stop and they created the Argentinians to destroy everything. That was a very important Argentinian, I cannot say the name. But the real question is that now you live in a globalized world. So you know what is the world, and you, Massimo, explains very well. So you haven't excusation, you haven't alibi. You have to change your country, bring the power in your hands, not blame what could come from abroad, because it's true. A lot of companies around the world came to, particularly in the south, to bring money and destroy economy. But now, in the globalized world, and I believe in the globalization, you have every type of knowledge, you have every type of information, and you have to decide because the power is in your hands. Is not easy, but is your responsibility. Up to you.
Now, do you think there's any...
Sorry, because the people, blah, 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 you are very poor and sorry. No, you are the leader of tomorrow. Not expect other people. If I became prime minister, everyone could become prime minister because I'm the symbol. If I became my personal, everyone could become prime minister, president, king.
Is there any truth in the idea that the young care more about the planet than the old?
Young?
The young care more about the planet than the old?
Yeah, but I believe, yes, that is true, and that is very important, because the young people today, in my opinion, is the great hope of new planet. There is a quote very beautiful of Shakespeare, not Shakespeare, sorry, absolutely, Oscar Wilde, totally different. The next generation is, I changed the quote in the course of this speech. The next generation is very crazy. Right. I love to be part of them because that is the most important opportunity of the world is the next generation, and particularly they care about planet, sustainability, values. I don't believe in the idea new generation is a generation without hope. I believe in the new generation.
Good. Okay. So we would be doing a disservice if we didn't bring our private sector colleagues. I think Steve Jobs spoke about the crazy ones as well.
Absolutely.
I might have included Jim Henson as well.
you cannot speak about Steve Jobs today here because after Saudi Aramco is better than Apple. You risk in terms of quotation, in terms of value and bar. So
right. So we're here to talk about jobs of the future, which brings us to Lord Grimston.
Yes, well, you've chaired companies including Barclays Bank, Standard Life Aberdeen. What's your message to your former colleagues as we march towards COP27?
Mobilize investment to support it. Mobilize savings products that allow people to participate in it. Find ways of involving the young, make the young feel that they have a stake in this going forward. But remember, we've been concentrating very much on the entirety of ESG. What about governance? Companies have to rule themselves properly. They have to live up to their social responsibilities. This is all part of the march that we are all on.
Now, Lord Grimston, promise me you won't give me a politician's answer on this. Promise?
Maybe.
Let's.
That was a trick question, wasn't it? That was a trick. That was a trick question.
Okay, we're going to get told off.
I love you.
We're running out. So name and fame, because we like points of light. Who does that well? Who creates these products? Because that's what you're calling for.
I think any of the big savings companies, they do that. Because there's a market for it. People want to,
so you're calling,
do it.
Forgive me, you're calling for stuff that's already happened. What's the point of that?
I want there to be more of it. I want it to be accessible to everybody.
But shine a light even higher. Well, let's raise our sights. Where are we headed for? This is about the future.
Yeah, look, we're heading for a future so that the world survives. And I don't believe this point saying that only the young care about it more than the old.
Good.
I've got 9 grandchildren. Do you think I don't care what their lives are going to be like going forward? Of course, the young people should participate. It's the privilege of young people. But everybody must participate. Everybody must make their voices known in this.
I do want to make sure we get our final young voice in. Yes. It's not fair if we don't bring Jansen Durham from Rwanda in, but a very brief question, please, sir.
Of course, and thank you all for having us today. Senator Renzi, you brought up a great point around Nigeria specifically, how there's going to be more citizens there than all of Europe combined. So I'm curious to hear from you all. How can we make the 21st century the African century? What will it take to bring widespread economic prosperity and sustainability to the continent?
All right, Senator Renzi, and then maybe a brief comment from Dr. Fouad as well.
I believe very clearly. I discussed about the numbers of Nigeria because that is the direction and the trajectory of the world. That is clear. The world look at Africa with the next really hope. But also in the last 50 years, the world looked at Africa as the next hope. So it depends from the next generation to be able to fight corruption in Africa, not only in Africa, to create stability. I don't know what type of institutional system, because I'm the last one in Europe to speak about stability, because I'm Italian. But the stability means give a clear framework for investments, because if you haven't that, it'll be impossible to invest today in Africa. And please, a lot of global players continue to be afraid about the investment in Africa, despite numbers unbelievable in Nigeria, very important in Egypt. I think is the second country in terms of population around Africa, and Ethiopia and other countries. So my suggestion is Africa is clearly the future. The question is when future begin, because it's the last 50 years every dossier explain now it's time to Africa. Your generation have the responsibility to try to change finally. Good luck.
Very, very brief.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question. Thank you, Senator. So we're all imagining now Lord Grimston and Senator Renzi down the streets of Sharm el-Sheikh on their green scooters. We hold this image very clearly in our minds. Dr. Fouad, what is your final message to our room here, many from the private sector, as we race towards COP27? A final thought to leave with ringing in our ears.
COP27 would be the COP for implementation. We're still expecting the private sector and the investors to come up with more robust, transformative tools for the fight against climate change. And they can do that because there is a story of renewable, but renewable is not alone the only thing that we need in the world. So as we all succeeded to make renewables bankable, we need to touch bases on all other development sectors that mainly focuses on the basic needs of humanity on food, water, shelter, and infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, that has been a brilliant panel, a brilliant, very short road to COP, but thanks. Let's have our audience give a very huge thank you to all three of our great panelists. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.